Hello everyone, it's patch rundown time. My name is Freak, and it's 8.24, which came out, well, now-ish by the time you watch this, or soon-ish if you're watching it from North America. Anyway, 8.24 is a fairly small patch. It is a small follow-up to the preseason. For context on this patch, I am almost certain it is the patch for All-Stars. In fact, I am 99.9% certain it's the patch for All-Stars. So that'll be pretty cool. But also because in the US, there was a Thanksgiving holiday a week or two ago, a lot of the development time into this patch was cut short because holiday. So it is a small patch. There will be an 8.24b in a few weeks' time, which will be a bit larger in terms of number of balance changes, but smaller in terms of like coding differences. And then I believe the next patch after that is going to be 9.1 in January in the new year. So preseason is running full steam ahead. I think this is, though it's small, a pretty good patch. And let's get into it. So first up, Neeko's coming out. She is awesome. The champion spotlight is out, voiced by yours truly. Really cool looking champion. I'm actually very excited about Neeko. I think the spotlight's really good as well. You'll Neeko need to check that out. That was lame. All right, so Aatrox. Aatrox is getting a small nerf. It's specifically to his ability to hit jungle monsters for bonus damage. Ultimately, they're saying they don't really want to make jungle Aatrox a thing anymore. They're going to let mid Aatrox and top Aatrox be things. That's enough diversity for them, so that's basically removing some monster damage. And that's supposed to hurt top lane Aatrox a very little bit, but mid lane Aatrox more so. So it doesn't poach things like Raptors at level 1. Here is the total damage for Aatrox Q, assuming you're maxing it first, assuming you're hitting all 3 spots. This is how much total damage Aatrox Q did before and after 2 monsters. It's some. All right, fine. That seems reasonable. Next up, nerf to Akali. Again, trying to reduce some frustration on Akali, and they're just reducing the duration pretty substantially on Twilight Shroud, both the base duration and how much you can extend it by hopping out and in. This is a pretty decent sized cut. It's 1 to 2 seconds off the duration. Here is this data table. The minimum duration is down by 20 to 14%. Akali typically maxes at second, so it hits max value fairly early on into the game. So that's the minimum duration, and the max duration is down by 25 to 20%, which is actually pretty substantial. Now, Akali does not always use the full duration. There's going to be plenty of situations where this change does not actually mean anything because she didn't use the whole thing. And okay, fair. But this will be somewhat of a cut. I think this is a big enough cut that people will notice the duration in their games, and she will feel less frustrating. She will probably not drop off top 3 in the ban list, but this will have a small power impact. I'm going to say to the tune of almost 1%, but shy of 1% as far as win rate's concerned. But you will notice a satisfaction difference playing against her, and I think that's a decent change. I think Akali is still in the zone of more frustrating than she is powerful. I still dislike that Twilight Shroud beats turrets. I think that was a mistake. On a personal level, but not my call. Next up, small nerfs to Camille. This is mostly aimed at jungle Camille. Jungle Taliyah was nerfed very heavily last patch. I believe her win rate climbed up a little bit, but is still on the weak side. But they've not done any follow-up to Taliyah yet, so that's where she is. But as far as Camille is concerned, has been a dominant jungler for quite a while, so a fairly small but reasonably meaningful nerf to Camille's attack speed. Here is that data table. She loses 6% of her attack speed, which is definitely non-trivial. Now, keep in mind that Camille has an attack reset in her Q, and technically base attack speed matters a little bit there because you can't reset until your attack lands, but in the real world, she's not really losing 6% of her overall attack damage because she's sneaking in attack resets there anyway. Want to point out that a nerf like this to base attack speed does not affect, the 6% value doesn't change when you have attack speed from things like E. It's still 6%. So things there. Either way, small nerf. It will hurt her jungle clear more than it hurts her top lane trading. You will notice it in PvP because you will have to wait a little bit longer to put your Q reset out. Players might, in fact, screw up and hit Q too early and lose some of the things they cared about and miss an attack because of that. So ultimately, I think Camille's win rate will dip more on day one than it will long term because this kind of change invites misplays. As an extra point of note, I really want to say I am super, super happy that we are trying, at least a little bit, to give more champions a 0.625 attack speed. Because 0.625 to me is like the baseline attack speed. And if you have more than that, it should be on purpose for a reason. And I feel like too often champions are being given above average values just because they feel good. Because, of course, being overpowered feels good. I care a lot about the base numbers that underpin champions, and I like when there's some level of consistency and not a bunch of power creep in a fairly invisible system such as base stats. So, great. Let's move on. Very large changes to Galio. Okay, so let's talk about what they are and then go to the numbers. So Winds of War is getting the Wind Blast, which is the projectile. That damage is going up. The tornado damage is basically going down. And so math will tell us, did the overall go up or down? There's also a mana cost buff, which is nice. Okay, Justice Punch winds up faster and moves faster, but deals less to minions and monsters, but who cares? And the R no longer gives an ally damage reduction and no longer knocks up for extra in the center. So this is obviously a fairly big nerf. When I ran on my numbers, I didn't see this line, so I don't have math on this, but it's roughly a 25% less durable and about 45% less durable. With those numbers, this is somewhere in the middle, like 33, I think, percent less durable. I think those are actually the numbers straight up. I'm within like 2%. So, okay, that's a big nerf. This is a buff in most cases that aren't wave clear, obviously. They're PvP buffs, they're damage buffs, because you're going to reliably hit this more often. That's a good thing. Maybe it's it's easier to wind in an auto attack versus like WQ auto then E versus like WQE or W auto E then Q, like those kinds of choices. You can wind in abilities maybe a bit more often. Anyway, let's do the math on Winds of War. Obviously, the mana cost buff is a buff. So let's talk about this damage change, where it went up by 20 to 60 in base damage and gained 0.1 ability power ratio, but lost 30 to 70 in flat tornado damage, which is obviously more, and it gained a flat percent health thing, but a very small ability power ratio. So again, let's go into the numbers. It's easy to represent this way. Okay, so this is going to be interesting. So again, Q1, right, gained 20 to 60 damage, which is this 35% mark. The ratio went up by 0.1, which is 13%. So, okay, these are meaningful gains. If they never get hit by the tornado, you are doing 30 to 15% more damage. That's a lot. That's a big deal. However, the tornado itself lost its base damage and instead gained a percent HP ratio. And I forget what my sample target was, but I think I aimed for like 550 to 1970 health, something around there. So a fairly standard mage, but not minions. And the base damage is pretty close. And then once you've maxed it out, of course, the ability keeps scaling because percent health damage. And so it gains. So PvP combat, this ability seems to be strictly stronger. PvE combat, arguably, potentially a bit weaker. And then we, in fact, look at what your target needs to have for equal base damage, and it's 500 to 1100 health, which melee minions have, and cannon minions have, and champions have, but caster minions do not. So potentially, your Q no longer one-shots caster minions, based on rank, based on AP, based on all those other things. And of course, there's one other value to care about, which is the AP ratio of the tornado of Q2, and that is substantially down in almost all cases. And in fact, your target needs 6,000 HP for the AP ratio of the tornado to be equal. Now, you still have a bigger ratio here and a bigger base damage here, so we'll talk about more later on, but Q1 is always better. Q2 is better in PvP, but worse with ability power. Or rather, eventually gets passed up as you, like if you bought 0 AP at all, your base damage is higher. But if you have like, you know what I'm going for, right? Like as you're building AP, your AP ratio is not as good because it would need 6,000 target health for your AP ratio to be as good. So eventually mid to high AP builds will be doing less damage in all cases than before. Okay, Let's spin this up another way. Let's put all the flat damage together and all the percent HP damage together. Let's pretty much use minions or stunned targets, people who got hit by a full charge W, got knocked up by your R, toggled by your E, Leona comboed them, all those kinds of things. Let's talk about targets that take the entire ability. Because we know the base damage is higher. We know the tornado is sometimes better, sometimes worse. Let's talk about the overall damage. Well, the overall flat damage is strictly down. It is strictly down by a flat 10, which is not that insane, not that horrible, but hey, it is down by about 5%. And the ratio for the flat damage is down by about a third because there is no more flat attack or flat ability power ratio on the tornado. So your flat damage is definitely down. And again, we think about things like caster minions, which don't have a lot of health. The flat damage is definitely down, and the ratio is definitely down. But of course, there is this 6% max HP value here, which is definitely reasonable and obviously is stronger. And if you want to match your total damage, your target needs 167 HP, because at 167 HP, 6% health is 10 damage. So your flat damage, your tank build, is always stronger. We already know that Q1 is stronger in all cases, but if you take everything, it's always stronger in all cases. Of course it is. But the AP ratio on flat damage is down, and the AP ratio on percent health damage is up by 33%, but it requires 5,000 health for that to meet up. Which means, so I'm going to kind of restate it all, your total damage, this far right two columns, what you really care about at the end of the day. In total damage, you will meet it. You will meet it because it only takes 167 health to meet the total damage of the old ability to the new ability. Flat damage, overall damage, 0 AP damage is up. It is up. You are doing overall more damage with a 0 AP Q in essentially every possible reasonable case. However, the total AP ratio of the ability is lower until your target has 5,000 health. So AP ratios are weaker, base damages are higher. Tank Galio is stronger, AP Galio is eventually weaker depending on how much AP the Galio has. Okay, hopefully that was clear enough at the end of it all. That's how that works. Next up, changes to Heimerdinger, slight bug fixes and tooltip fixes. Turret Beam Attack now actually scales off CDR. Turret stats are an expanded tooltip, which I think is a good thing. I think having your initial tooltip be obvious is a good thing. I love expanded tooltip text. That's a big positive to me. But the Hextech Micro Rockets tooltip update, okay. RW has a damage change. The max damage is slightly higher. Missile 1 is the same, but missiles 2 through 5 are slightly higher. Missiles 6 through 20 are slightly higher. So what does that mean for Heimerdinger? Well, here is the data table. 5 missile old did this much. 5 missile new does this much, and it is a 6 to 8% damage bump. Now, of course, hitting 1 missile is the exact same as before, so keep that in mind. That 1 missile was unchanged. So if you're at 2 missiles or 3 or 4, it is slightly less than 6 to 8% more damage, because linear scaling, duh. The ratio is the same, keep that in mind. But hey, RW does up to 6 to 8% more damage in the 5 missile case. You hit 1 full salvo, but not the rest. 20 missiles goes up by even less. It goes up by 1 to 3%, which is not 0, but not a lot. So RW is buffed to a very small degree. Okay, cool. And the Q actually goes to CDR. So overall, small Heimerdinger buffs. And now suddenly, Hjarnan has a job. Next up is Illaoi buffs. Illaoi's E is frequently maxed first or second. Last I looked up Illaoi, which is, to be fair, a while ago, but last I saw her a bunch, you maxed this either first or second. W has no level up incentive at all, so you definitely don't level up W. And I said, okay, let's say you max it second. And so your cooldown is 80 to, well, eventually the same number at 12, but for a large portion of the game, this cooldown is much, much, much better. And I think because of this, you are going to always max E second, that the level incentive on E has gone down. Yes, I'm pretty sure the damage conversion goes up with rank, but with just the cooldown being less of a level incentive, I'm pretty sure you always max it second now, and you are going to max Q now every single time, which means more technical damage. And hey, this is a pretty substantial cooldown buff. That's pretty nice. Next up is the ultimate cooldown going down at higher ranks, down to a very, 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 very low cooldown, considering that this is a champion who often buys things like Black Cleaver or maybe Trinity Force, often things like a Death Dance. You're going to have some CDR. This is going to be under 1 minute for a large portion of the game. Well, I should say it's going to be under 1 minute in late game for sure. That's the better phrasing. It's a pretty big deal. I think Illaoi is definitely gaining pretty substantial late game power because I think her late game power is generally a bit weak. The fact that she has her ult up every time is a good thing. These are pretty solid Illaoi buffs. Cool. Next up, nerfs to Aurelia. Aurelia is the second queen of I'm annoyed at this champion for the League of Legends player base. Akali is the first one. Aurelia is the second one. And so Aurelia is getting a 4 to 0 second cooldown nerf on Defiant Dance. This is an ability that's typically maxed last because the level up incentive on Defiant Dance is damage and cooldown and nothing else. It's pretty low reason to rank it. Now maybe maxed second because you care about 2 seconds in the cooldown. But E gains a lot as well and seems like a slightly better level incentive. Now it's debatable. Maybe Aurelia switches back to W second and thus she gets less ease. We'll see. Either way, it does not grant its own stack of Ionian Fervor just by casting it. You still have to get, you still have to hit enemies to get it. And the damage reduction is down pretty substantially as well, from 50 to 40%. Okay, those are all fairly reasonable nerfs. What does this mean? Well, it means your cooldown on W is 25% longer for most of the game. Even if you max it second, it's still going to be a while till it catches up. And your damage taken is up by 20%. Instead of taking 0.5, you take 0.6 damage coming in. That's pretty substantial. That is a pretty substantial nerf to Aurelia's defensive toolkit. She will still have it at least once per fight, and it will still block a fairly large portion of damage, just less than before. These seems like pretty good nerfs. I think this will do a lot to bring Aurelia into line. I don't think Aurelia is... I think she's definitely a bit too strong, but not insanely OP. I think this is a pretty meaningful hit. I think this nerf is bigger than Akali's hit, for example. Next up are nerfs to Jax. And this is interesting because I actually saw like a lot of the data and decision-making that went into this change specifically. Jax jungle is actually stupid OP in low elo. Like the jungle Jax win rate by elo graph goes like this. It goes down and to the right. Jungle Jax is up here, really insane, and then you go down, and it's still very good, but it's less broken as you go higher up. And the read is that, well, in low elo, you can just auto-attack farm and AFK for like the entire first 25 minutes of the game, and so a late game nerf is a bigger hit to low elo Jax than high elo Jax. But Jax overall does need nerfs because it's a bit too strong. So that's that change here. Here is the overall damage on 3 auto attacks based on character level, because you can't trigger this without 3 auto attacks, so I figured it's fair to just include the auto attack damage of the character itself. It's down 0, 20, and 40 because that's still the base damage differences. But of course, it means nothing at all. This nerf does nothing until level 11. The first 10 levels of Jax are entirely unchanged. It means nothing. But hey, 4 to 7% lower damage. The value of this nerf goes down over time as you build more attack damage. It's not a very big hit. Next up, nerfs to LeBlanc in the early game. At level 9, it's the same because you max W first. But nerfs to LeBlanc in the early game, pretty substantial. Going to make her much more gankable. This is a pretty meaningful change to how durable she is. Well, yeah, it's a little bit how durable it is because she can't get away from all the ganks. She's going to take some hits a bit more. She can trade a lot less. This matters. Pretty big hit there to LeBlanc. Next up, Victor, definitely deserving some follow-up nerfs after the first ones didn't do enough. Pretty big hit to Q, 1 second on the cooldown at all times. Missile damage down 10 to 30 based on rank is a pretty big deal. However, Death Ray getting 1 second back itself, which is kind of nice. And the ability power ratio on the first half of the Death Ray, the unaugmented Death Ray, is going up. Of course, this is 20% higher because duh. So, here's the big Victor Q nerf, and it is pretty substantial. It is overall Q damage because you have to cast it and then auto attack. So I included the Q1, Q2, and his basic attack damage in all of this. It's about 8% less base damage. which is reasonable. And the cooldown, of course, down by 1 second, or up by 1 second, is 12 to 25% longer. That's pretty substantial. So yeah, that is a pretty big nerf to the Q. That's a good thing because the Q already lined up really favorably with Iceborne Gauntlet's cooldown. And so a strict cooldown increase just means less Iceborne Gauntlet triggers, which is a good thing for those playing against. This is a really solid nerf. It's less shields for the trading. This is a very big deal. Less hastes. It means a lot. Of course, the missile damage down 10% means quite a bit as well. Death ray buff, cooldown is down about 10%. The ratio is up 20% because duh. Yeah, that's pretty meaningful. This gets to a pretty meaningful spot here. What I did notice, and this could be easily a sample bias, is that Q-Max Victor was substantially higher win rate mid lane than E-Max Victor, and of course it was better top lane as well. But I am pretty sure that Q-Max is better in all cases. Like, I realize, again, it could be sample bias because people only go Q-Max in good Q matchups like Irelia. But I have this thinking suspicion that Q-Max is just always better, and that this sort of nerf that lowers the reason to rank up the ability slightly. Like, going 8 to 4 is a bigger deal than going 9 to 5. 60 to 140, bigger deal than 50 to 110. That you're lowering the level incentive on Q, you're raising the level incentive on E, and that will help balance out the builds. I still feel like Q-Max Victor top will be viable, just not broken. I get the suspicion that E-Max Victor mid will still be on the weak side, but not by much. That's my inkling. We'll see if I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. Next up, some nice changes. So basically the way some skill shots worked is if you flash while in the middle of casting it, the ability would either, like, if I'm here and I'm shooting here, right? Like, look at like a lowercase letter I. If I'm doing this and I flash this way, does the ability do this, or does it do this? So they're saying if the direction changes and you flash or something, the ability of Ezreal Q, Ezreal W, and Kai'Sa W does this. You aim at the same point, but you moved, and the missile comes from a different spot and goes a different direction. Ezreal Q ordered this, now Ezreal W and Kai'Sa W does this as well. Cool. The other option, though, is Irelia R after flash, and Aatrox W after flash will do this. They will shift to your new location, because what thing you could do is if you were aiming right here, you could flash above and it would aim down. That was also a possibility. And now if you flash above with Irelia and Aatrox, it does this. It doesn't mean, though, that if you're Ezreal or Kai'Sa or something, this can happen if you flash above. But considering you're shooting those things at long range and not aiming them right in front of your face, that's unlikely. Whereas Irelia and Aatrox, that was quite possible. That you were fighting someone, you're neck and neck with them, you aim like on their model, they flash backwards, you flash after them, and then goes backwards. So that seems reasonable. Okay, so that changed. That seems like a positive. Clones now inherit debuffs, which is good. VFX updates to Anivia, Dr. Mundo, Gragas, Renekton, and Teemo. That's cool as well. I love it. Excited to play those champions with new effects. Death Stance now works on magic damage, which is a straight buff to champions like Jax. Also now worth considering on someone, say, Kai'Sa, if you don't want the AP. Thinking of other magic damage dealers. Kalista doesn't do very much. Tristana doesn't do almost any. Anyway, there's options. Jax being the obvious example because, of course, nice. And obviously Riven wants it because duh. No accidental Eye of the Rift Herald, which is kind of nice. If you're taking champion damage or monster damage, you can't just accidentally, oops, I summoned it and I'm stunned for 3 seconds. Poacher's Dirk is gone from the game because honestly, no one was buying it anyway. I'm always a fan of items getting deleted from the game. If they weren't doing much, this is a positive in my opinion. I bought it once in a while. Like I played some Poacher's Dirk Lee Sin and stuff, but yeah, I think this is reasonable to get rid of. Dark Harvest, keep in mind, got hotfix nerfs in the middle of the patch that lowered the base damage by 10, the damage per soul by 3, and the ARM damage per soul by 2. And now this damage is going down a further 20 base damage. And I think this is enough, okay? So a couple days ago, I was streaming, someone asked me about Dark Harvest, and I went and spot checked like the 10 most played champions in League of Legends. And for about 2 of them, it was optimal. And for 1 or 2 others, it was a viable alternative. And for the rest, it was essentially unplayable. Now, to be fair, being viable on 40% of the cast is a lot. That is high, don't get me wrong. That is a lot. But considering that the community reaction is, why is Dark Harvest even here? It's so broken. Every champion runs it. No, it's not being run by every champion. It's being run by like 2 champions a game. It's fine. It's fine. It's slightly strong. And so it's getting nerfed a bit. It's getting nerfed by 20, which is going to mean that there's going to be, I think, an appropriate amount of dominant users, an appropriate amount of reasonable users, and a lot of, nope, not for me, champions. There's plenty of people who pick Dark Harvest and are wrong. There's lots of those. Like, if you're looking at your scoreboard and you're seeing 10 Dark Harvests and your reaction is Dark Harvest is OP, you're an idiot. Your reaction should be, my teammates are idiots. That's the more reasonable reaction. Because there is almost no games that aren't maybe ARAM where 10 Dark Harvest is accurate and correct to do. With this nerf, this should be a fairly meaningful nerf to ARAM as well. I think ARAM will still be dominant if you're on the winning early game team and you're playing poke and you're just like running around being Vel'Koz and landing Qs on people. Dark Harvest exacerbates early game power a lot. I actually, especially with seeing like Dark Harvest in this model, I increasingly really wish there was some level of ARAM specific balance like Nexus Blitz has. Where it's like, look, Vel'Koz, go screw yourself. Ziggs, Sona, Nidalee, go screw yourselves. I wish there was some level of this to clamp the win rates a bit. There's some abusive champions in ARAM that I wish were a bit more fair. Whatever. Either way, this is a good change. I like that the base damage is going down. You can still harvest your souls and get more powerful that way. Should be cool. Next up, small nerfs to the Mercwolf and Raptor spawn time, mostly aimed at Smite mid. What's interesting is data indicates that Smite mid is not OP, but people do dumb things all the time and complain about them, like Dark Harvest and Smite mid, which doesn't appear to be that strong. Smite mid is not even gaining win rate based on elo. It's actually just not good. But look, it's frustrating to play against. It's an annoying play style, so F it. It just gets nerfed. I think it's fine. I think it's okay. Like, I know there are junglers who wanted to start Wolves and start Raptors. Like, I get that. This does nerf some real junglers. But I'm going to postulate that, on a whole, not having a Smite mid take your camps is a better overall jungle experience than having a slightly worse Wolf or Raptor start. That's my opinion. Nexus Blitz is coming back, and that is amazing. I love Nexus Blitz. It is awesome. Hooray for Nexus Blitz. Hooray, hooray, hooray. Bounty had screwed up some non-SR maps. That's been fixed. If you have like Kindred or Nico type things, you can now use some hotkeys to click those. That's cool. A bunch of updates to Ranked, which adds in Iron, adds in Master, removes Division 5. Cool stuff here. Ranked armor to show off what elo you're at. Some more UI stuff. That's cool. Great. That's cool as well. Great, great, great. Okay. Bunch of bug fixes. If you recall to the middle of WQ to cancel the combo. Wow, that is a thing. Yeah, okay. Okay, cool. So yeah, a bunch of bug fixes. I usually don't read these because it's too much text for me to care about. And usually in the interest of brevity, of course, you can read those yourselves. Cool ice-themed skins to Twitch, Mundo, Soraka, Mr. U, Renekton, and KDA Akali Prestige Edition. Sick. Not for tokens, by the way. I think this is just an RP purchase. Chromas for champions. That's pretty cool. So let's TLDR. 8.24 TLDR. Neeko's coming out. She looks super cool. Aatrox is slightly worse at killing jungle monsters. About 10%. Kali losing about 1/5 of her invis duration. Camille losing 6% attack speed. Galio overall is getting cheaper mana costs, a weaker ultimate, and a Q that does more base damage and has a lower AP ratio. Heimerdinger does slightly more damage with RW. Illaoid has better E and R cooldowns, which is nice. I mean, none of these are very big changes, right? So that's why I'm not giving you very much in the TLDR. Irelia having a pretty substantial nerf on W cooldown and substantial nerf on damage reduction. This is a pretty big deal. Should nerf her quite a lot. Jack's getting a pretty, I feel like, a love tap on the R. I feel like this doesn't do very much to the champion. Maybe 1% win rate at most. Lamont getting a very big nerf to early game W, probably 1.5% win rate or so. Victor getting pretty big nerfs to Q first and small buffs to E first. Should do a lot to help with Victor top not being so broken. Some nice updates to how Flash works. Clones work better. VFX updates. Death Dance works with magic damage, which is cool. You don't get screwed by either Herald. Potions start getting deleted. Dark Harvest getting, I think, fairly nerfed now to be in a balanced spot. I think Dark Harvest is in a good spot now. Smite mid is probably dead. Nexus Blitz is in. That's the biggest deal of the patch. And stuff to ranked, like, user interface stuff. So that's pretty cool. That's going to be the patch rundown. Thanks for watching. I love you all. And All-Stars starts in, like, 2 days. See you there.